So when you look at, what you've achieved, you've done so much, Balazs, and and you're kind of wired in a very, very interesting way in terms of how you see the world and how you've trained yourself, and then the additional training that you've taken on and all of it. When somebody as young as you and you look into the future, I mean, you kind of crushed it. It's not like you got to get up tomorrow and go to work for financial reasons. You
Mhm.
may get up in the morning because psychologically you need to keep your brain fired up. Like, how
Mhm.
do you? Where's your vision for what's next for you in 5 years from now, 3, 5, 10 years from now? Do you ever see uh, not doing this, or would you have a vision of $1 billion? Like, where does your head go around this stuff, Balash?
My personal goal, my personal vision was around being a present father when I eventually started a family. That was my driving North Star for my business since I got started. And it took me 3 years to get to that level. And then my wife and I were progressing our relationship. We ended up getting married, and we had a little bit of a slower time getting pregnant. It wasn't easy for us. Like for some people, it actually was quite challenging before we were finally able to have a child. And that was my driving force personally.
Hmm.
And then on an outer goal, it was around paying that forward to other people. Like my favorite thing in my business is seeing families traveling together, homeschooling their children, spending as much time together as they want to, not having to do anything, but getting to choose what they want to do. Lights me up. So my social media these days, when I log on, it's all people in my business for the most part that are just sharing their travels, their adventures, and they're happy and they're together. And so that level of impact is what I feel like I'm still just getting started, because we have 225,000 sales in 100 countries in my business. Thousands of people that are free now as a result of this business model and the training and the systems that we put in place for them to leverage. But I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. So, from a level of like dreaming, my purpose in this life outside of my personal life and my family is a global prosperity movement. I genuinely believe that in 2023 and beyond, with the power of the internet and technology, now AI and everything that's happening in the AI space, we don't have to follow those models of 9 to 5 jobs and working those long hours and being apart from our families and the old traditional roles. So like I'm completely against that. I fight against that model. I fight against that system. And I'm a huge stand and advocate for freedom on all levels: personal freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom, inner freedom. Every single type of freedom is basically me and what I stand for. So I really am an advocate for that. When it comes to what happened with my family, it was really interesting. So I worked for 7 years in my business before my daughter was born. We found out my wife was pregnant 2 weeks before the world shut down with COVID stuff.
Hmm.
So you can imagine building a business for 7 years, fantasizing about all the things that could happen, trying to plan accordingly to be prepared. I'm like, listen, man, I've checked all the boxes. Okay. Like when I become a dad, I can just turn everything off and I'm free and I can just be a dad. That was the vision. And so we find out this exciting news after years of trying to start a family and with no luck. And finally it's happening. It's really exciting. And I'm like, yes, man, I'm ready, man. I'm free. And like, I was so proud of myself. It was like that moment. I'm like, man, I did it, man. 2 weeks later, the world's shutting down, global pandemic. And I'm like, oh no. And it was this thing where like, I didn't have context. I had no idea what reference point to look at. Like many
Hmm.
people out there, they didn't really know, okay, is this serious? Is it going to like last for the rest of our lives? Is it short term? Like I had no context of like, how do I actually contingency plan this?
Hmm.
And meanwhile, there's 9 months before my daughter is going to born. So I'm like, man, I got to kind of figure this thing out. Like what's going to happen in the next 9 months? So I went through this very weird internal, I don't even know what you call it. Like one day I was like doomsday prepping. The next day I'm like, it's not that bad. Like I was all over the place for probably a couple of months when it started, but it was from this fear of becoming a father and bringing my daughter into this upside down clown world. And I'm like, this is not cool, man. So once she was born, I was like, okay, I'm going into like offline. And I was very, excited after years and years and years and years of really a lot of hard work and dedication to my business of like phones off, computers off, internet, unplug the modem. I'm not available. And my daughter slept on me every single day. We spent all day together as a family. It was a really beautiful, special time. And I didn't know when or if I wanted to actually work. I had an open blank book of like, maybe not sure. We'll see. I was 35 when my daughter was born. So I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to be done for the rest of my life, of course. But I'm like, I don't really know what the future has in store at this point. So I left it open ended. And I told my wife, I'm like, I might get the itch in 3 months to really go back. It might be 6, it might be 12. I really have no idea. I'm just going to see what happens. So 6 months goes by. I'm like, no desire to do anything work related. A year goes by, zero desire. I'm like, hey, this is really cool. My business was growing 20% year over year. My income was growing. My impact was growing. I worked about 10 hours a week, which I don't consider work. It was like maintenance. I did a couple coaching calls, just to keep myself fresh, but it was very minimal, exactly when I wanted to do it in my schedule. Said no to pretty much everything that came across my desk for the most part. And then my wife had a hair appointment, and she goes every few months, and it's like a big important thing for her.
Of course.
And of course, and there's a conflict of schedule, and her hairdresser had to move her appointment to another day that I would normally do a 2-hour mentorship call that I do once per week. And that's like my passion business. It's not for money. It's just, I really love coaching people in that way. So I do that. And she's like, oh man, I gotta do this appointment on this thing. Should I cancel it? I don't want to interfere with your call. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm like, my daughter's 18 months old. I'm like, I think, this will be a good opportunity for me to introduce her to like this other side of myself, which is the businessman and the mentor and the coach. So we made it happen. And what was really interesting is she comes down, we're doing a Zoom call just like this, same sort of frame, and she's sitting on my lap right here beside me. And this is recorded, by the way. So I'm so grateful that it's documented. She's sitting on my lap, and I could see her on the screen on my computer, and she's looking up at me like this and just gazing. Perfect child, not moving, not moaning, not complaining. She's a toddler, right? It could be going all over the place. She's just sitting there and looking up at me and just staring. And I'm trying to focus. So I'm like kind of ignoring her, sort of like talking and talking. And then all of a sudden I just go, man, I gotta look at her, man. So I pause and I look down in her eyes, and it felt like the universe, like the Big Bang. It was like this explosion of like, man, it was my eyes and her eyes, and like the Big Bang is what it felt like. My heart, boom, my fire, and I just felt it in that moment. I'm like, daddy's back. Like, I need to get back in the game. And because of that moment, I told my wife, I'm like, it's 18 months. That's what it ended up being. It was 18 months of kind of taking this sabbatical or this mini, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, just freedom, I guess. And when I sat with that feeling, it wasn't about personal growth or financial growth personally for my family. It was like, I have to share this with more people out there, man. People got to have that same thing, and I can't stop. If I stop, I'm selfish. If I stop, it's just like, I'm good now. So like, fuck the world kind of thing. But it's like, no, it's the opposite. It's like, I got to get back from an impact standpoint. So to answer your question, I know it was a really long answer, but to answer your question now, I'm more driven than ever to be of service, to give, to improve myself and my skills to better serve the world. That's why I said to you before the call started is I'm really inspired to get into new audiences. Like, I want to speak on other people's stages at other people's events so I can impact them, so I could share this business model and this product and like this way of life that most people don't believe is available to them. They truly don't think this is available for the average, regular, ordinary person that listens to your show and other places. And I'm like, but it is. And I've proven it, and I know it works. So I guess I'm more fired up than ever. From a financial standpoint, the target that I'm really excited about, just as a goal, as a bit of a target, is $1 million a month in personal revenue. That's the next goal that I'm aiming towards, and then we'll see from there. But I'm also really excited to be more philanthropy based. And my target was at 40 years old to really shift into an investor more and more, as opposed to this cash flow business that I've created. So my target is to get to a $1 million a month in my business of monthly reoccurring cash flow. And then obviously I don't need that much to have my life. I could, but that's not really where I want to go. So instead, my plan is to live off of $1 million a year from the cash flow. I want to donate $1 million, and then I want to invest 10 million. So that's my actual numbers that I'm looking to hit. And then we'll see. And who knows after that. So that's my
Well,
short-term goal.
I love that. I love that clarity. Let me just share you how I'll share with you just how great this show is. So a few years ago, Janet LePage, a young lady, real estate investor. Some people on the show would definitely know of her. She had just hit a $500 million worth of real estate transactions, and she said, "My goal is to hit $1 billion." Well, she hit $1 billion. The next time I had her on the show, she was at 1.2. And I think her goal was 2 billion, and she went to 2.5. And I haven't had her on the show again, only because of timing. But I think Janet and Western Wealth just crested 7 billion in real estate. So it
Amazing.
shows good luck. I'm telling you right now. I'm just saying that.
That's so
But
good.
Balazs, let's go back a little bit, because you made some really interesting observations and comments that I want to see where you're at with it. Not the least of which is we talk about freedom. Then COVID comes along. Comes along. We all get locked down. If there's it seems like we're losing freedom on a regular basis. Even this many 3.5+ years later, it doesn't. It's hard to look forward and be optimistic when you look at what's happening economically, when you look at the global macroeconomic things. When you look into the future, how do you see it? Can you still be optimistic? Can you still look at this as a business model for somebody? Do you see it as a safety net? How do you view it when you're talking to potential clients?
Yeah, fantastic question. So, like I mentioned, when the whole news broke around the world and the changes that were happening initially, I felt really like the rug got pulled out from under me. I wasn't really sure how to approach it. I got sucked into the news cycle and the doom and gloom and the fear for sure. Had
Mhm.
to pause and I prefer to be more unaware to a lot of that. Of course, I keep my finger on a lot of the bigger topics and I look into them and I stay open minded to like the pros and cons of it. But one of the things that I discovered about myself during that time was that the truth lays somewhere in the middle, right? Like I was falling further into the doom and gloom and the worst case scenario and the really um like if it went all the way to that far extreme side of things, I'm like I was really believing that that was coming and that was happening. But I realized like now in hindsight of how it's played out, obviously the future is still unknown, but just in hindsight, if I analyze my thoughts and how I approach things, it was somewhere in the middle. It was, and when I look at what I can control and what I focus from my thoughts to what I consume to what I read to the actions that I take, that's the place that I thrive. Is as soon as I start thinking about big government and world elites and all these really big agendas, I feel powerless and I feel really small and really insignificant. And then I freeze and then I don't do anything. And then I'm like, what's the point? Like throw in the freaking towel. Like that's the energy that I don't want. So do I know for sure what the future has in store? No, I don't think anybody does. But can I be optimistic and look on the bright side and do my best to provide solutions that I know how to provide? Yes. So that's the place I choose to live. Every once in a while, I'll have a whiskey and watch something crazy for 2 hours and go, shit, man, if that happened, that would be intense. And then I go right back to, hey, let's get focused on what I'm good at, how I can serve people in the solutions. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is with the business model specifically, there's a few key things that I love about Enagic. And there's a couple of, I'll kind of break it down real quick. So number one, I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but did you know that in Japan, there are over 50,000 companies that are over 100 years old? Did you know that?
Yeah, I did, and it is absolutely amazing when you think about it, isn't it?
So cool. So when I first discovered Enagic, it was a 35-year-old company. It's the same CEO from day one. So the same guy has been running it for the last 49 years. He has a son who's going to take over, who he's been grooming as the next CEO and whatever, when eventually his time comes. He's 82 years old now. He is committed to living to 120. He's still travels and acts and plays golf, and he's very fit and healthy and all the things. And, so he's convinced he'll live to 120, and his son is the successor of the business, and they have like a multi-generation plan, like so many Japanese companies. So that gives me a lot of peace of mind of what I'm building is for the future. It is for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the COVID stuff happened, I definitely had an oh shit moment, because it is a handmade, high end technology, medical technology in Japan. They hand assemble them like a Rolls Royce, and then they ship them from Japan all over the world. So in my mind, I'm thinking logistically, oh no, what happens to the manufacturing? What happens to the parts? What happens to shipping? What happens to the borders and the shutdowns and the restrictions and the lockdowns? I went into like, oh no, what if we can't sell this product? What if there's delays? What if it's sold out? What if it's unavailable? So I definitely had that moment of like,
Mm-hmm.
shit, maybe this is not a good business to be in when all this is going on. So that first 30 days of when news hit, like mid-March, I think it was, to end of April, so 6 weeks, I was in a fear of, oh man, is my check in a tank and whatever. And it didn't. And the commissions never stopped. The business never stopped. And what I found out from my community, including myself, was that this became a more in-demand opportunity and business
Mm-hmm.
model. And the reason for it was the freedom aspect of it. For example, when people started being told that they had to get the vaccine or different things, it went against people's freedom of choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people who were in a safe, comfy job, corporate, whatever it was, were starting to be told, you have to do this to stay working here or you're done. Like, we're going to let you go. So a lot of the people that thought they would stay in that type of career long term started going, I don't want this to ever happen to me again. And interestingly enough, many people that were in that predicament had a choice. Kind of. It was framed as a non choice. But, anyways, the people who said, you know what, I'm going to quit this job because I don't agree with what you're making me do, were now unemployed, technically screwed financially with their bills and things like this. And many of them invested into this business and they figured it out. And now they created incredible freedom, incredible finances, all the things. But it was because of this catalyst of what happened. So other people just went along with it and whatever. That's their decision, right? So when we look at Enagic as a company, what I love about them is the long-term generational business plan, the whole succession model of like grooming your family members into that role, and the fact of how they handled things with logistics and business and operations during such a nightmare of a situation where so many businesses went under and they didn't pivot and they didn't adjust to how they do things. Enagic killed it, like knocked it out of the park. So they had their first $1 billion in sales year last year after
Wow.
48 years of being in business. And that's in US dollars as well, currency. And then so that was big. Now, another thing that they're brilliant about is that they have a holding company, parent company in Japan, and then they have other smaller subsidiary companies all around the world in all these different regions and countries, etc. So, as an independent affiliate myself, I can actually shift my distributor account to another jurisdiction and another company, and overnight, I reroute my money.
Mm-hmm.
That's unique. That's super cool. So when the Canada stuff got really bad in BC, 8 months of like really bad lockdowns and whatever, we
Mm-hmm.
went to Mexico, unvaccinated, got out of here. We didn't want to go down that route personally. We went down to Mexico and we bought a villa in Mexico. And we're building that now as a bit of a safe haven of like, man, if shit goes weird here, at least we can go bounce to Mexico. And we also chose Mexico because of the driving. Like technically, if we really needed
Totally.
to, we could drive there. So that was
Yeah.
part of our like contingency plan when I was in the doom and gloom sort of mindset, which is
Yeah.
great because we got a really cool vacation property that's currently being built. But the other side of it is, let's say like all of North America gets really weird. It's like we could go to Europe, we could go other parts of the world, we reroute everything, get paid in different currencies. If the US currency fails, we can get paid in euros, we can get paid in other things. So there's a lot of options and flexibility in the business to have
Mm-hmm.
that location independence. So unless we lose all financial currencies and the ability to access the internet across the whole world, we should be all right. And Enagic is like really committed to that as well. So what I see for the future that has happened and accelerated this shift to people having online businesses, side hustles, side incomes, etc., is that there was this huge red flag and this warning that went off, and some people have heard it and said, okay, I need to learn something different. I need to pivot. I need to make an adjustment. And some people have ignored it and
Mm,
pretend like everything went back to how it was
mm,
pre-COVID, which we know isn't the case.
no.
Um, and then the final thought that I have is around the business model itself that we promote is around getting paid to be you. So when we look at social media and what people share, right? Everybody has their own interests. And some people have children and a family, and that's really important to them. Other people are digital nomads who travel, who don't want children. Other people are passionate about art or music or yoga or whatever it is. Everyone's got their thing. But majority of those things are not monetizable easily without getting stuck into a brick and mortar traditional business. For example, if you want to be a yoga instructor, well, what does that come with? Well, that comes with you needing clients. You have to stay put so the clients can come to you. So now you have to pick a location for your yoga. Maybe you have a yoga studio. So the passion is yoga, and then you start bolting on all this stuff that feels heavy, and you're like, man, I don't really want to do any of this shit. I just love yoga. Can't I be paid to just do yoga on my own and not have to do it to make money? So what we really teach people to do is build a personal brand, identify the things like their ikigai. If you are familiar with ikigai and all the circles, is like, what's your ikigai? What falls into that perfect center place? And then how do you have a vehicle and a business model that just supports you to be paid to be you? So if you want to post yoga poses or yoga instructions on your social media, your TikTok, your whatever, because that's what you love, and then people are like, how do you get to travel the world and do yoga on every single beach on the planet? How are you doing that? Click the link in my bio and let me show you this business model. So
Right.
everything has been framed that way. And then after they learn the business model, the next piece is they go, oh, it's water. I need water. This makes sense. And it's not a weird thing like a transition. So that's how we've done things very effectively. And I do believe that the future is unlocking more and more international, no borders type of businesses. And like, I talk to every single time zone almost every 24 hours, and it's not even weird for me anymore. I just
Mhm.
know this window in PST is the perfect window in Australia or London or whatever, and I just accommodate that. And I really love that. I always wanted to have a global, like, make the world my playground, right? Like, I traveled to Australia 5 times in the last little while. It's a long flight. It's a big, big thing. And I don't even get jet lag anymore because I figured out sort of these things of making it feel like I drove, kind of close by because of the repetition and stuff. And I love that. I think it's so cool to be anywhere on the planet within 24 hours of a flight, like
Yeah.
now I just need my own PJ, and then we're taking things to a whole nother level. But right now, business and first is really, really nice. But ultimately, I think, like, when I see some guys like Grant Cardone and whatever, and they got choppers and they got planes, I'm like, that would be really cool just from a time saving aspect. And um, having a business meeting in Dubai, like, yeah, I'll see you in 3 hours or whatever, however long it
Yeah.
takes to get there. I'm like, man, that's badass. So that's kind of one of my personal goals, is just ease of use, and really connecting the world more personally. But yeah, I think it's just the beginning for this type of business model, to be honest. And companies growing rapidly. My business is 30% year over year right now in the last 2 years. So 2.25% month over month. And that's pretty outstanding. I'll tell you one quick thing and then I'll stop, is that when I hit the first rank in the company, it's 100 product sales to hit the rank. It took me 11 months. And because I track my monthly sales, I can forecast where we're headed, right? And so I told people beginning of the fourth quarter of 2022 that based on the forecast, we will average one new person at least per day in my organization at that level that took me 11 months when I started. And that's happened. We're at 191 people or something like this for this year. And it's more days than it's outstanding. So that compounding is really possible with this model as well. And you never know who knows who, where, and how. And there's no borders. You can't say like, oh, I can't do business in Africa. Sorry. There's literally no place on the planet we can't build this, which I think is really cool.
I love that. I absolutely love it, and of course, I love the product. I've used it for 10 years plus. Stephanie and I have done that, and I
That's
attribute a
so
lot of
awesome.
just how healthy our life has been to that being part of our lifestyle and our own kind of healthy living. So, love it. So. As we wind down, because we've been going at this for a while, it's such a
Yeah.
great story, such a great story, and I love it, Boz.